train smart and train hard. You have to eat smart and be consistent. And these little things that everyone talks about and throws around, they actually matter. And it's not about being perfect. It's about consistency, which is adapting to the environments that you have in that moment. And so it's, can we show up in the best way that we can? Can we do the best that we can in that day? And ultimately that to me is being the hardest worker in the room.
Hattie Boydle, WBFF World Champion and Global Fitness Coach.
Hattie will challenge you to step out of your comfort zone
And understand there is no one-size-fits-all approach.
The fact that we have so many different things coming in, like from our phone, alerts, everything, it is so hard to be slow. You know, when we're seeing everyone on the internet doing the thing that we want to do, what do we want to do? Keep hustling. When actually we need to slow down and be like, well, is what I'm doing actually leading me in the direction that I'm doing it? And am I doing it the best of my ability? Because sometimes it's not about doing more. It's doing what's in front of you the best that you can. Like, people have a really, I think, low expectation of what hard work is. No one wants to work hard these days. They say they do, but they actually don't. And so you have to ask yourself, like, am I willing to work as hard as this person here that I'm inspired by? And if the answer is yes, great, go and do the thing and do that for 10 years. And then you're going to be an overnight success. I remember my dad said to me when I was 16, he said, nothing in life comes for free. And then I, had this epiphany when I was 30, and I was like, holy shit, everything that I want in this life does not come for free, including happiness. If we think about when we are feeling a sense of freedom and happiness, it's because we're working on something that gives us a sense of freedom. Everyone wants freedom, but you have to work for freedom. And motivation is great, but motivation flirts with us. She's not always going to be there for us. Whereas discipline is something that we can call upon. We're all disciplined in some area of our life. So it's choosing when and how you want to exercise the discipline and how much of it you want to exercise.
Over the years, you've your fitness journey would have changed from that competitive side of things to, what it is today as well. How has that mentally been for you to go from the more competitive sense and then, channeling that change?
I still compete. Mm-hmm. It's just not as often as what I used to. So I would still say that I am very much in the competitive space, but I would say that I do it with a better strategy now. Mm-hmm. I think when I first started competing, which was 13 years ago, I did the best I could at the time. And that's with the knowledge and the skill set that I had. And as any amateur can do, we can generally compete quite a few times because, one, we don't know any better, and two, we need to get the experience. And so hindsight always gives us the lessons that we were probably looking for in the time. But it's not till COVID that I was kind of forced to have time away from my previous show, 2019. Obviously we went to COVID, and then 2022 was my returning year. And the progress that my physique made with that much time away, and even like a different change of perspective of what competing meant to me, just gave me a really different energetic feeling of my preps. Now, whenever I get ready for a show, yes, my goal is to always win. I don't do anything in half-assed manners. And I think that drive is the undertone that's like, show up, do what needs to be done, and do it at the best of your ability. But the main goal always is to improve my experience of myself. Because at the end of the day, that to me is how I'm living my life, and then what everything means to me in that moment. So I don't think as I still feel I'm very much in the competitive space, I'll probably compete for a couple more years. Mm-hmm. I really don't want to be 40 on stage. That's one thing for sure, and I said that the other day. But it's interesting. When I was 28, I said to myself, when I'm 30, I don't want to be competing. I turned 30 and I had the best physique I've ever had. I had my best physique, and then beyond that, when I was 33, I had an even better physique. And so I thought to myself, well, I still love the sport. I love what I do. I'm trying to do it even better. I feel like I do it even smarter. Health is always at the forefront, and of course my experience myself. But I think, well, why would I stop now when I haven't even really achieved everything that I set out to achieve in this sport, whether you want to call it a sport? I do. I feel like bodybuilding requires the same amount of practice, intention, physical elements of any other sport. It's just that we do things backwards. We starve ourselves to be to be in the best shape or performance that we can be, which is just so far from any other sport. Yeah. But I don't think I'm done yet, and I think there are still some unfinished business within some of the goals that I had. So yeah, I think. Yeah,
I think there's a good frame as well. Like in there, there's a lot of things to take out of that, but in the a lot of people have this 30, that's it. Or, oh, I'm 30 now. Like it's, and that's such a cool reframe for then someone that's approaching that, they can now hear that and be like, oh, maybe that's not the end of the world when I get to 30, when I get to 40, like there's more to it. And as someone like myself that's like 24 and you kind of then, my mindset is like, I got to do it before 30.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe you don't have to do it all before 30.
I remember turning 30 and I was like, what? Like it's like I knew it was going to happen, but it kind of was like, oh my God, I'm turning 30. And during that time when I was turning 30, I was going through a really difficult time in my life. Really close friendships, relationships were ending. And I really had to, don't want to say find myself, but I really had to look into the relationship that I had and what I made things mean and what I also relied on. And it's interesting, like you just have to train smart and train hard. You have to eat smart and like be consistent. And these little things that everyone talks about and throws around, they actually matter. Like I always say that perseverance and patience and also practice is the equal result of progress. And it's not about being perfect. It's about consistency, which is adapting to the environments that you have in that moment. And so it's, can we show up in the best way that we can? Can we do the best that we can in that day, in the circumstance that we're in, with the bandwidth that we have available to us? And ultimately that to me is being the hardest worker in the room. But when I hit 30, it was like there were so many different changes that had happened. And you do notice that you can't get away with what you used to. And that's also totally fine. In fact, we probably shouldn't try and get away with what we used to. We should try and learn to do things better. I probably train the least amount now that I ever have in my entire life. And I still get or look probably better than I looked in my 20s because I have so much repetition under the bar. Like I've had so much practice, and I look at some of the young girls and I think, you keep doing what you're doing for 10 years and your best body is in that 10-year mark. It's not now, right? But you do have this different kind of bandwidth that you can handle, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a chapter along the way. Like you've got this time where you can go. And for some people that might be like pre-kids or pre-family, even a relationship in general, where you're like, I can be very selfish in this moment and just dedicate so much time to myself that I'm able to do 3 times as much as the 35-year-old that is on a different chapter of their life. Yeah. I think within that as well, it's like the consistency is only possible if you're flexible. Yeah. Like, and I know like obviously the name of your business being the Flex Method, that's kind of what you're preaching in nutrition sense, and training, but that comes in just a holistic approach to life. Like you're not always going to be able to train the same amount of days in the week, depending on life, business, health, whatever it may be. But the consistency comes from you being able to ride that wave a lot better. Yeah.
I think consistency over expectation. I think we rob ourselves from learning or progressing when things are circumstantial or they're an expectation. And we're not always going to live up to this expectation. And most of us don't actually have the reality of a true expectation, whether it be, results, whether it be what is needed for a result as well. I think there's definitely a misrelationship is that even a word? Misrelationship, uneven relationship between someone's expectation and the reality of change, especially when it comes to building muscle. And, part of that is, your coaching element and who you work with and what they promise to you. And then there's also how much effort is someone willing to put in, because often the time is people have this expectation that things are going to be perfect, and life is never perfect. So when we say, I'll only do things in this circumstance, I'll only do things when the environment is perfect or the condition is perfect, then we rob ourselves from leaning into any sort of practice. Right? One of the reasons we work with clients for 6 months is because 6 months gives us a lot of different practices. Life is going to throw so many different things at our clients, like it does at us every freaking day, that we give them so many more opportunities to learn different skill sets throughout that 6 months, so that after 6 months they don't need us, because our goal is to help someone be resourceful. Is to educate them so they don't need us. Like when people want to work with us beyond 6 months, it's because they want us, and that's what we want. I don't want to be needed. I want to be wanted. Yeah. So we really do. We always teach a flexible method, whether it's through training, whether it's nutrition. And most of the time that people come to us, we're pulling them back on how much exercise they're doing. I used to train 7 days a week, twice a day, and I used to say I love training. And then, I realized, or someone said to me, I know you love training, but do you love results even more? And what I realized was, yeah, I love training, but I didn't like how I felt when I didn't train. And that's, I think, where a lot of people mask, I love exercise, I love training. It's like, sure, but you're also really fucking tired and you're burning yourself out and you're not seeing any sort of result. So what do you prefer more?
Yeah.
What do you love more? But the truth is they don't like how they feel when they don't train.
It's an avoidance.
It's an avoidance. And there's this earning right when it comes to food, which I used to do that. It was like I had to earn the right to eat food. And that's a myth. Like, you do not have to earn the right to eat food. And most people just don't even know like how much the body needs just to keep this amazing vessel alive.
Yeah. It's that baseline that people just kind of, I'm like, you're breathing, your heart's pumping. It's like you need energy, you need input for that as well. How did you navigate overcoming? That's a big jump. That's a big change. Like when you're in that sense, in your mind, that mindset where you're like, I do need to earn my food. I do need to earn the right to do these things. I mean, I imagine it's not like that. It was over time, and it may still be lingering in some cases today. But what are some of the things you actually found worked for you?
It's interesting. A client of mine asked me the other day, do I still have any lingering kind of habits or triggers from my eating disorder? So for those of you who don't know a bit of my background, being a teenager, I suffered from an eating disorder and was hospitalized. And I said, I don't have any triggers around food or behaviors or anything like that. The thing I suffer with is not good enough, but that doesn't come in the form of my physique. It comes in the form of maybe knowledge and skill sets. But the thing, if I tune into what was the biggest things that helped me kind of transition out of disordered eating habits and disordered behaviors, was education was a big one. Seeing that there was another way to live and recognizing I didn't want to live this way anymore. And until you're really backed into a corner with how you feel and how you're living in this repeated cycle of dead end, you have to then seek another way. And I'm not saying that I just suddenly changed and it was perfect, but I definitely asked for help. And I think that is the thing that a lot of people are scared of, because we either don't want to disappoint someone. You probably hear that with clients. But also we're scared to get it wrong. And let me tell you, I laugh. I always learn the hard way. I can't begin to tell you how many fucking mistakes I make in my life. But let me tell you, at least I learn. And this is why I guess I no longer fear failure, because I'm like, at the end of the day, if I replace the word failure with practice, then all I'm doing is practicing. And if I change the word practice with learning, then all I'm doing is learning. And I love to learn. And so the language that we use is really important, especially when it comes to healing, overcoming, creating courage, overcoming things like failure.
Yeah. I think it's great. It was Stephen Bartlett. I went to his event in Adelaide like a few months ago, and I'm sure I've probably heard it before, but just in the context of everything, he was like, failure is feedback. I was like,
that's great.
You bastard. I was like, it just like,
pointing that one.
It went, I was like, that really registered. And even though like by the sounds of it, you're similar in the sense is that I've always had this thought, I knew if something went wrong, I've tried to figure a way around it. Like that was a normal thing, but it's nice to get that clarity around like why. And it's like, because that's where the development comes from. And like that failure, the cliche sort of thing as well of like, the failure is when you stop, purely out of like giving up. A little bit different if it's just the right decision to stop a relationship or whatever it may be. That's a conversation I feel like people don't go down heaps. They're like, because there's
Comfort
times
wins.
where it's not because you're being lazy that you stopped. It's because that's the right decision. But there's feedback in all of that.
Yeah, a question I always ask myself is like, did I do everything I could before I chose to stop? Did I do the best that I can? And I think, I always laugh, I've got strong attachments. So things in relationships or even just like things or projects like that I create attachments to, and it gets to a point, it's like, have I done everything that I could for this project, for this person, in this relationship, with this thing? And is it just time to cut it? And what we label things is what we're going to experience of that. So like, is it failing, or is it just closing that circle and putting it to bed and then starting the next thing?
It's a feedback loop in itself.
It's a feedback loop.
Yeah. Which is a challenge when it comes to, especially like when it becomes personal relationships. Even, as a PT, you're like, I've got this client, it's my job. Why can't this person's not getting results? And it's like, if you feel like you've done what you can, there's no way those calories aren't working. You've changed them 5 times and they're just not, you're like, I don't think it's me anymore. Like it's in you. Maybe you have to have that hard conversation in that sense sometimes and be like, hey, I don't think you're being honest with me right now. Like,
and then you have to realize, is it your expectation that's ruining this thing? Because like you have an expectation of what you want them to be and their expectation is different. And so that's also something to wrestle with, especially when it comes to other human beings. It's like, is it my expectation of them or is it an agreed expectation of both of us? And that's, one that you learn with clients. Like I've got a client and I recognize, I was like, okay, my expectation of what I think you should do or I need you to do is not her expectation. So actually, do I need to like just work with what is she willing to do and that be the standard? Because otherwise I feel like I'm wanting the goal more than she does. And that's not fair at all either.
No.
So the goal has to be wanted by the person that you're working with, or we have to want our own goals. And then it is our responsibility whether we do it or not. And I love, you probably heard me talk about radical responsibility. And I love that so much because radical responsibility was like a principle that I really took on. And that was like life-changing for me because it was like, I am wholly responsible for how I react or how I respond. The words I choose, the thoughts I have, the thoughts I want to keep, the goals that I set, the people that I want to spend my time with, where I spend my time, that is my responsibility. And that was so empowering because not blaming someone else is like freeing, but then not saying it's like the blame. It's, hold on, just what are you doing? And the choices that we choose, especially the ones that we choose over and over and over again, they lead us somewhere. And I think when I was really sick in hospital, that was like a moment when I was like, hold on, I'm not here by chance, I'm here by choice. And it really made me tune into, holy shit, the choices that I'm making over and over and over again, there's a result on the end. There's a destination, there's an outcome. So it really made me tune into what choices that I was making. And again, I could always reflect on that and be like, okay, where am I at with my choices?
Which is an extremely hard, that's a deep, challenging situation. And had someone just walked up to you and just been like, it's just your choices. You'd have been like, oh, great advice, mate. Really appreciate that. Like,
thanks.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
I think that's the power of it come from the internal. Like you come to that realization. Sure, you can have outside people helping this, but you have to actually believe that yourself. Podcast I was only doing this morning and we were talking about like you could throw stats at someone as much as you want and facts. Be like, this is the proof, like this is how it should be or this is the way. But unless they come to the conclusion themselves, they're still not on board.
That's it. One, it always has to be relatable. So this is why numbers don't always work very well. And two, they have to take ownership of the goal. You can't give them the goal. They have to decide it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think a really important part of coaching is asking the right questions, because we might be able to see a perspective or a lens that they cannot. And we might recognize that the goal that they've set is either unrealistic or you're noticing that it's probably a compensatory goal. So it's compensating for a feeling that they're feeling, and it's kind of being used as a Band-Aid. And rather you say, oh, that's a Band-Aid goal to your client, they're going to be like, what? It's like, let's like peel back some layers around why you want to achieve this thing. And ultimately they come back and they're like, oh, maybe I just thought I wanted that. Because again, a lot of people's beliefs and goals, they don't belong to them. They belong to the other people that they surround themselves, and they're just of influence. They're influenced by them. Who you spend your time with on social media, you bet that's an environment that you're in. And so tune into what is influencing you to make certain choices. And is it bettering you as a human being, or is it pulling you away from your values or challenging your values? And so I always say, like, we're not limited by our resources, we're limited by our self-belief. And so whether you think you can or you can't is your right, like you're right. But so many of our beliefs are influenced by the people around us, which is why it's important to notice who you're spending your time with. Yeah,
which there's still a lot to be learned from that in itself. It's kind of like, that doesn't also mean you have to, one thing that really frustrates me in this, I guess the extremism of social media is kind of like, stop spending time with all these people, especially, I feel like, especially in the male algorithms, I feel like that's a big thing. Like I find that a lot. Once again, I don't see the female algorithms as much, but it's massively the blokes talking about like disconnect from the people that don't fuel your life. I'm like, not everyone I have to hang around with has to want to have the business and, you know, have the physique and do all these things. I'm like, but what else do these people offer me? Like my best mate barely goes to the gym, but if I call him, he's there and vice versa. So what do I flick him off because he doesn't want to go to the gym like I do? I just think it's like, you know, all these clippable moments on podcasts and stuff, and it comes out and it's like, well, just go a few layers deeper. Like you don't have to just knuckleball and remove everyone. Yeah. Because they're probably, some people are there for a reason in the first place, and that may be just that, you know, relationship and the support and the trust and a soundboard, but they don't have to be doing exactly what you want to do either.
I think some of the people that might know you better than anyone else are not the people that have the same goals as you, and that's okay. Yeah. But you're going to relate to them in some other way, whether it might be their values or how they want to live their life, or even just how they nurture others, how kind they are. You know, some of my best friends that I've known for over 20 years, again, majority of my friends are not actually in the industry. While I do have, you know, quite a few friends in the industry, but I love them dearly because I'm like the same Hattie that I was when I was 13 to them. Yeah. And I just love how kind and caring, and I could be no matter what I'm going through, I know there's no judgment. Like I could be anything, I could come to them at any moment, and I would never give those away, but they're not motivating. I'm not motivated by them, but fuck me, I love them. You know, and I think it's really important. It's like, well, who are you culling and why? Like obviously there are certain people when you leave them, you're like, maybe they're not the person I'm going to choose to spend my time with, but there are certainly going to be other people, and there should be other people with different interests to you, but you have other things that you relate to with them. Like, yeah, I think that is also something to be really notice as well, because you do want to have different relatabilities and different hobbies and be around just really loving people that know you deeply as well.
And you got to be careful. Like maybe it's just down to the environment you're with them in. Like you don't like drinking, go for coffee. Yeah. Like they go out drinking, cool, that's right. They can. They just go with a different group of friends, and then you go for coffee with them, or you go for a walk down the beach with them. Like you pick these environments. Yeah. As long as they're not trying to like then push. Like if you go, I don't want to drink, and then I think it's when they're going, oh come on. They're the sort of ones you go like, piss off. Like, you know, like your best interest for me is what's best for you, and that's a conflict of interest, I think. Whereas when they can be like, no, do what's best for you, and we can still have our friendship outside of this as well.
I used to laugh because when I used to live in Sydney, and I spent all my 20s in Sydney, and I was still competing, my friends really didn't know what I did. They're like, oh, you're doing that thing again, like where I start to obviously like go out less and, you know, don't eat at restaurants. But they would still always ask me out. And I'd go out for a few hours, sober, have a dance, and then go home and leave. And they never pressured me to do anything, you know. And when I would say no, they understood, even though they didn't quite get why I did this thing. Like by the end of it, I looked so, you know, extreme to them. But they just, you know, always cheered me on. And I was so grateful that I never felt pressured by any of my friends to do anything. I always felt supported, even if they didn't, like I say, understand what I was doing.
Yeah, which is why you can still maintain those friendships today.
Yeah.
One of the big things you guys preach with Flex is that 80-20 when it comes to like dieting. You know, people hear that all the time. And they probably go, I don't know exactly what you mean. Yeah. What's the implementation of that?
So whenever I think of diet, I think of nutrition philosophy. And a nutrition philosophy is not just what we eat, but how we eat. Because when I think about sustainable change, when I think about the habits that I want to execute, or even that my clients want to execute, I think, what are the ways in which we can eat, train, live that we actually want to exceed beyond this deficit that we're in? And so how do we use this nutrition philosophy to ebb and flow the different phases that we're going to put our bodies through? So the 80-20 rule for me is that 80% wholesome, unprocessed foods, your veggies, your fruits, your micronutrients, proteins. They don't have to be lean proteins. They can be any sorts of proteins. So hitting your protein requirement. Your carbohydrates are going to be a blend of a little bit processed. So like you're going to have some like bread's totally fine, your rice, beans, chickpeas, legumes, whatever you want. And then the 20% of the soul food, the 20% of soul food is food that, you know, isn't going to be high in micronutrients. It isn't going to give you anything beyond the fact that you just really enjoy eating it. And I do believe, the reason I love that way of eating is because we're trying to move away from this all or nothing mindset. And it's the all or nothing that leaves people back to where they started, if not worse, because now they have a trust issue with themselves and they have this, I failed. But it's not that they've failed. It's just that maybe the methodology is a little bit wrong. So when I think about it, the word diet, I don't associate with a deficit. I look at it as a way of being. The nutrition philosophy is how we eat, and that includes your behaviors around food. That includes how often you prep your meals and how often you eat out. So for our clients, like we encourage them to eat out while they're in their diet or their maintenance phase or their build, because we're trying to practice how we live, not just on, off, only when we do this rigid approach. However, you do need rigidity before you need flexibility. I always say you got to earn the right to put weight on the bar. You got to earn the right to be flexible. And the further away you are from your goals, the less flexibility that you have, right? So it's almost like you got to earn these points in the same way that you're going to earn the right to be able to squat after doing, a leg extension, a goblet squat, a split squat, and then a squat. And the reason I do like that as well is because we love to notice progression. There are 3 things that make humans feel a sense of joy and happiness. The first one is learning a new skill. So even when we're learning about nutrition, it can be overwhelming, but we know that we're learning a skill. The second is when we are tracking our progress. So not from I think I'm doing better. It's no, I am seeing and noticing that when I do my meal plan or my macros, or when I'm eating out and I'm doing the preparation, or when I'm coming up to training, this movement feels better. And then we're tracking the weight. So we're tracking our weight, or we're tracking, all our measurements. And we're like, oh my God, I'm progressing. There's this sense of joy, and especially when things are hard, which they're always going to be hard at times, then it buys us in the game. It keeps us continuing to learn the skill, continuing to do the practice, continuing to aim to progress. And then the last one is being a part of a tribe, right? This is why things like, group setting classes are so big, and people are more drawn to do them than they are to go to the gym on their own, because they're around other people that might be on the same level or that can encourage them to keep showing up. Right? So community is super important for human beings to thrive, because it's part of our biological needs to be part of a tribe, right? Yeah. But then the other 2 things are things that we can be radically responsible for, right? And we can ask for help when we need it. So that's the kind of lens that we like to look through when it comes to nutrition. Because at the end of the day, like I said, after 6 months, we want our clients to be like, I've got the tools. I can be resourceful. I know how to eat. I'm not going to be trapped by fad diets or bullshit on the internet because this guy said X, Y, Z. And it's like, that worked for him. It's like, cool. We understand principles. We understand methods, but we're going to do something that we can do for long term, because what we're looking for is sustainable change. Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. I always describe that core pillar. If weight loss is the goal, calorie deficit, and you go, boom, there's like all these things flying off of that. And there's never someone that did it the same. Because someone may have gone low carb, but they may have done something a little bit different off another leg down there as well. And so it's picking and manipulating that around you. But I really like then within that, you have the earning of the soul food a little bit more as well, is that early days, you would have been similar when you first start tracking calories. You're like, oh my God, that food's got that in it. Oh my God, that food's, and you're like that huge mind shift. And now I can I eat pretty much the same thing every day. So I'm like, I don't really track that often. But once again, my goals are not to compete or do anything like that. That would be a different story if I wanted to go down that route. But I have earned the right to be a little bit more. I don't have to scan every barcode and do all those things as much, because for 2 years I scanned everything. I was like too much. I was like, yeah, like shit.
Love
like,
this thing.
Yeah. You go up to the counter, you're like, do you have a barcode for that one? Like, and they're like, buddy, go home. And you're like, oh shit, okay.
But like, so good.
Now, you have that education. And I'm like, that's
informed
freeing.
Eating.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I say that to people, I'm like, even if I get you to track your calories for, let's start with a week, because that sounds more achievable. And then they go a week and they're like, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. Now I can get them to go further. But they've educated themselves that peanut butter isn't the same as whey protein and it's mostly fat. Little things like that. They're like, they've opened their mind to that. Yeah,
I think, look, everyone wants freedom, but you have to work for freedom.
Yeah.
Everyone wants happiness, but you have to work for happiness. And I remember my dad said to me when I was 16, he said, nothing in life comes for free. And in that moment I was like, I was getting all these things for free. I was 16, the boys, whatever. And then I, had this epiphany when I was 30 and I was like, holy shit, everything that I want in this life does not come for free.
Yeah.
Including happiness. If we think about when we are feeling a sense of freedom and happiness, it's because we're working on something that gives us a sense of freedom. And as you named, it's like the goal is not for you to track forever. It's a choice that you make. Now, I track my nutrition, but I love tracking my nutrition and I have no emotional attachment to it. It's like brushing my teeth. It's like, it's so neutral in its energy for me. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that. But I've just done it for so long. And the freedom that gives me is a body I like to live in. But also, I enjoy collecting data on myself. Like at the moment, I got a DEXA scan 2 days ago. I've been getting DEXA scans for 12 years, 13 years. So I've got so much data, and I laugh because like over 12 and a half years, I've only actually put on like 4.8 or 5 kilos of muscle in 12 years. Now everyone thinks I'm this jacked thing, and I'm like, if you look at my data,
there's the reality.
There's a reality. It's just that like things have changed in where I've developed this muscle, and every year I get ready for a show, I get a little bit leaner. So this crossover just makes, things a little bit different. Every year I compete, I lose some muscle, and then I've got to gain that back, and then hopefully a little bit more. But I'm sitting at 11.2% body fat, comfortably, easily, eating 2,800 calories. And, 5 years ago, there was no way that I was eating this amount of food on this condition. But because I have had so much repetition under the belt of tracking my nutrition, being consistent with my nutrition, that doesn't mean being perfect. Let me tell you, I'm not a perfect human being. I'm so far from it. But I'm fucking consistent. And then I'm a hard worker. And those two things over the last 5 years, after the last 18 years of training, have landed me in this position where I have a sense of freedom and a sense of knowledge about myself and the habits and behaviors that I get to choose each day.
Yeah.
Because I know the result on the other end, and that's not with it being perfect either. Could I look better if I was perfect? Maybe. But what's perfect? Because our idea of perfect changes all the time.
And if you were a little bit better, you'd be thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
You'd still be
it still wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
There's always something to work on, and that's the thing I love it. I'm like, I want to work on this body and this self, this soul, this spirit forever. Like I just want it to get a little bit better each time. Every year that I celebrate a birthday, it's like, another year what I got to know about myself and learn about myself. And is it perfect and pretty and happy at all times? No, it is tough. Just like every other human, I'm just as human as everyone else. But I don't necessarily let the hard times or the negative times stop me from doing the things. Even if at the moment I would love to just pack up my shit and fly away somewhere. It's like, and then what? Oh, all that shit's still there.
Yeah.
So you lean into it. Yeah. So you lean into it.
Well, that's, I think, like, is it Hormozy? He says, like, fear and all those sort of things is a mile wide and an inch thick. You're like, once you get through it, you kind of like,
I love it. Oh, yeah.
That's not too bad. But you got to step in and lean into fear a little bit. Obviously that's scary because that's why it's called fear in the first place. But that's growth. That's where the feedback, that's where everything we've kind of talked about there is. But I also think just this general rule, I think it was Gary Vee, and he said like, I think he was talking to a PT actually, and this PT was wanting to crush it in business or whatever. And he's like, hold on a second. If I came to you, you're a PT, and I was like, I want to put on 15 kilos of muscle in the next year, you'd be like, you're crazy. But when you come to me and say, I want to make $1 million in the next year, and I call you crazy, you're like, why not? Why can't I do it? And it's like, sure, maybe there's a world where these things are reality, and you can push and have some unrealistic expectations. You get further than you would have, but you have to acknowledge whatever field. I think if people reflected on their own field, let's say someone's a real estate agent, and it took them 10 years to get to where they are, they need to apply that same mindset to their training, to their nutrition, to their relationships, because it all takes time. And people understand it in their niche, in their industry, but they can't seem to put it across other things. Yeah, I do that. I'm sure you've done that.
Don't we all?
But I think from when I reframed like that, and especially for me, it was for business. Fitness, I understood it took time, but business, I'm always like, come on. Like you look at these people crushing, I'm like, well, I should be doing that, and it's like, how long did it take?
Yes, and I think that's the downfall of social media is we see the tip of the iceberg, not what's underneath. And that can be, again, is that the expectation or the standard, or again, just what we're exposed to, right? So we only see what people want us to see. We only hear what people want us to hear. Like no one's getting on there being like, fucking failing today, lost this amount of money. Yeah, how'd your day go? It's like no one talks about that.
How motivating that is.
We only hear about people's success after they've been successful. Because one, they can look back on a lens and be like, oh, this is the mistakes that I made. guys, and then this is the thing that I did that was helped me be successful. But also, like I said in that moment, no one's been like, today I failed. Today I lost X amount of money. Like, you're just not hearing that on social media because it's too real. It's too real. And so it is important to always tune into like, okay, where am I at? And am I doing everything that I've set out to doing? Am I making the commitments? Am I following through with the commitments of myself? And if I'm not, what am I willing to do? So the beginning of this conversation, you talked about a why. And I think why is great, but why is really emotional. The how and the what are always the action taking moments. It's like, how am I going to achieve this? What am I going to do? How do I need to, or like how or what do I need to do? What am I willing to do? How can I apply this? Who do I need to ask for help? Why is emotional in terms of like the goal setting, but if we're already really emotional and we're like asking why, sometimes it's not often useful, especially in times of frustration and overwhelm. And I think that's what a lot of people tend to experience when things aren't going our way or when we're looking at others and we're comparing ourselves to others. And I think we all do it from time to time. And if you can catch yourself and notice that you are comparing yourself to someone else, recognize that it's probably a little bit unfair. And rather than comparing yourself to them, be motivated by them, but come back to yourself and go, okay, am I willing to actually do the things that are required of me to be as successful as that person? Because half the time, the honest answer is no, I'm not. If you really found out how hard some people are working, and this is what I love, Alex Hormozy always talks about work. He's like, you think you're working hard? There's always someone else out there working harder than you. Like, people have a really, I think, low expectation of what hard work is. No one wants to work hard these days. They say they do, but they actually don't. And so you have to ask yourself, like, am I willing to work as hard as this person here that I'm inspired by or I'm comparing myself to? And if the answer is yes, great, go and do the thing and do that for 10 years. And then you're going to be an overnight success, right? Because that's what we see, the overnight success, not the 10 years it took to get there.
Which is, and again, social media, I can tell you I'm working hard. I could make you feel like I work so much. You would never know. Yeah. That's the challenge. You go online, you see some 16-year-old, I work all the time, I finish school, I'm like, I don't know, do you? You could be lying to me. But also, like, is hard the goal? Is working all the time the goal? What if you could make the same amount of money and not work as hard? Like, do you have to wear busy as a badge? I've done that. Someone goes, how's your week been? Oh, busy.
So busy.
I'm like, has it actually?
Flat chat, Dale, flat chat.
I'm like, pretty sure my screen time was up a little bit this week. So if I showed you that, my phone might disagree. Yeah. But we wear it as a badge. But then also back to like what we see on social media and the highlight reel, that's also because it's what we want to see.
Yeah, like, it's also motivating. You know? Shiny things. It's motivating. But the reality is, I bet you if you took your time off your phone, you'd get a whole lot more work done. Yeah. And that's for all of us. That's myself included.
Toss it in another room.
Yeah, literally. It's like put it away or, put on silence and put in another room and don't find it till the end of the day. But, we do have these addictions and I often get upset with myself. I'm like, I spent too much time on my phone today. Like, that's also something I need to work on because I'm like, I would have so much more space to write for myself because I enjoy writing than what I would if I was not on my phone. Yeah.
We're so disconnected from creativity because we're always trying to be busy. Yeah. And busy has become not even better. Being productive either.
Productive is better.
Well, that's it. Like scrolling Instagram is busy in a sense. You're doing something. But what happened to the kid that used to go out and kick the footy and have this freedom? Yeah. Of freedom of soul and of mind and of thoughts. Like, it's very hard to grind creativity. But if you're always doing something, where do these ideas pop up? Where do they come from?
If you read about some of the old writers, they used to take themselves away into like a cabin and they would force themselves to write because that's where eventually they would have the most creativity, space, quietness. We just don't have that anymore. Like, half the times we are telling ourselves we've got ADHD or having like some sort of focus problem, or we're lacking in, like you said, creativity or time. It's because, and we're feeling overwhelmed and we can't think, it's because there's just so much stimulation coming in. Like, we're just not built for that much stimulation.
Which is like, it's become such a bonus because we have so much we can do. But how do you control that? Like, especially if you're like young and you've not had that experience and you're kind of like, I've got this rectangle here that is so powerful. Yeah. And I just have no idea how to leverage and use it and to have that ability to put it down. Because now if someone goes to the woods now, They don't leave the phone at home. They got to put that on Instagram. Got to take a
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Got
yeah.
to tell people what I'm doing. And that's,
Literally.
again, like where you don't see that reality is like some of these, maybe people are doing that, but they're doing it properly. So you don't see it. Because if they were posting a picture of them in the cabin doing their creativity, writing, drawing, like playing music, well, that's not actually doing that thing because they've taken this rectangle with them.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it becomes tough. With I guess back to the food side of things. So if It Fits Your Macros became this, obviously people kind of were a little bit divided with that. And that probably taps into a little bit of that 80-20 is kind of saying like, we can fit all these things in, but it's adding that level of rigidity to it so that it's not this full freedom to be like pizza, donuts, this, that, whatever. Because I guess food still, obviously it makes you feel a certain way as well. How much are you like, what are you measuring and how are you actually helping clients to do that? Is that a matter of being like calories, 20% of calories of that food? Is that how you attack that?
Great question. We give our clients guidelines. So, when clients come to us, they can either choose a meal plan, and the meal plan that we create will be based off our guidelines and the foods that they enjoy eating. And then when it comes to our clients that want to do macros, we say, okay, 400 grams of fruits and vegetables, aiming for at least 4 different colours. 200 to 300 grams of fruit. Again, it might be 2 or 3 pieces, aim for different colours. They're the first things that you're going to put into your diet. Then we're going to look at your protein. Ideally 4 meals, 3 minimum, like in terms of like 4 servings of protein, 3 minimum, anywhere up to, we've got a lot of shift workers. So on their long days, we go up to like 6 hits of protein because they're just up for so long they can. But generally, like I'm a massive fan of just like 4 meals a day, like 3 main meals, 1 snack. Some other people might like smaller meals. It doesn't really matter. But once we've got our guidelines around nutrition with the 400 grams of their veggies, 200 to 300 grams of fruit with their diet, quality protein coming in, and then we aim to get our clients to eat, a bigger hit of their carbohydrates. So their biggest carbohydrate meals in their peri-workout window. So that's their pre and post-workout window, unless they train first thing in the morning. Generally, we do like a percentage of their carbohydrates, their total carbohydrates in that pre-workout meal, so about 15 grams of their total carbohydrates just before they train. And then they're going to have anywhere between 35 to 40% of their total carbohydrates in that breakfast. And then they're going to spread the remaining of their carbohydrates throughout the rest of the day. On non-training days, we just say, look, spread your carbs pretty evenly over the day. Again, these are guidelines. They don't have to be perfect, but if we can exercise a system that you can rinse and repeat every single day, this thing that feels like a lot of effort in the beginning is going to be really effortless towards the end. And then when it comes to you going out and being social, you've already got some guidelines in your head that when you're looking for your food, you're like, okay, I need a little bit of carbs, I need a little bit of this, I'm going to eat a bit of, salad. And even when you're not tracking, you're kind of always tracking. Right? And that's actually what we want. We want self-awareness. We actually want to exercise some self-awareness. And, I love the term, like flexible boundaries or flexible rigidity, but flexible boundaries because freedom has boundaries to it. And actually, as humans, we thrive with boundaries, right? So flexible boundaries, it's like flexible in your choices of your food. The boundaries are the macros that you have, the calories. Now, we also know that calories are king. So if you do want a little bit more flexibility than that, then hit your calories, hit your protein. If you're someone that's a lifestyle client, some days you feel like a little bit more fat and you're going out with your friends, like, I don't care if you don't have perfect fats and carbs. Like, we're not trying to be perfect, but we're trying to get consistency, right? And consistency is adaptability. So as long as there's that preparation phase, which is a habit and skill that we want to practice, that gives us a certain result on the end. As long as we've got that, and then you're practicing the protein's really important, and then you can have that little bit of flexibility in there. Hey, you've done the best that you can, and I'm really happy with that. Versus all or nothing, don't track, come unprepared, get to the social event, do the YOLO thing, roll out of there, feel pretty shit the next day. That's the thing we're trying to minimize as much as possible. Yeah,
well, then you start to sacrifice massively other elements of your life, which sacrifice has to happen because you're going to have, they're obviously having to change their eating habits in the first place because otherwise you just stay the same.
Yeah.
But you still want your social life because we said tribes are important, people are important.
Yeah.
And that's like back to the friendship again. Like it's all tying in together why there's the importance to have that flexible approach. Flexible not being just do whatever the fuck you want. Like I really like that flexible, guidelines is really good because, and we like routines.
Yeah.
you know, you wake up at the same sort of time, you eat lunch at the same, you know, our hormones naturally, if we're used to eating at that time, we'll say, hey, it's time to eat, I'm getting hungry. You know, that's it. It's all these key signs to suggest that the body likes routine. And I find like a lot of people also try and fight that though, rather than like step into it a little bit where they can. They kind of want to do something a little bit crazy, different, whatever. I'm like, maybe you don't have to.
Yeah.
It could be simpler.
I think when it comes to like, if anyone's listening and they want to improve their relationship with food or their behaviors around food, ask yourself, what is the practice that I want to have for the rest of my life? Like, what do I want to practice with my nutrition? That's what it's like. Create a nutrition philosophy. Get really clear on what balance is for you. That includes how many meals that you prep in the week, how many times you eat out. And again, balance is going to change over time, maybe especially as we get older. Or even the way we want to be flexible when it comes to being on holidays. Again, we don't want to go away and just like do the YOLO thing and come back and be like, oh, I feel like crap.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, can we come back weight stable? Because I exercise some flexible rigidity. Like, and I was conscious about the choices I make. And yeah, I might have had a little bit more dessert, but I shared it with my friends. So I didn't eat the whole thing, but I had a little bit. And I think as much in that moment that we want to eat more, like everyone always wants to eat more. I think it's a very common thing. We all do. After any sort of savory meal, I'm like, God, I'd love something sweet. But I don't have something sweet after every meal because then I'm going to create a behavior that I'm going to have to try and change later.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to have something sweet a little bit later when I always have it. And that's the thing. So if we can practice doing the behaviors that we want to continue to have for the rest of our life, think about how you want to start exercising that now versus going and doing an 8-week challenge or a clean eating program where, yeah, it feels great while you're motivated, but what about when you're not? And what are you going to say to your friends when they want to eat out with you? Sorry, I can't. Like, that's not the way we want to live.
No.
That's not the freedom thing that we say we all want. Freedom has a different type of discipline, which means we have to exercise discipline, but discipline can also be flexible when there's boundaries in there.
I saw a really good graphic that probably nails the motivation and the discipline. It was like this dude doing a pull-up and the motivation was he was like pumping him out. He was going like 100 miles an hour, like getting, and then the discipline was just like 1, 2, and the discipline kept going and the motivation got tired after like 30 minutes. And it was like the training, training nutrition. It's like, you know, sure, when someone comes to you and they're like, I'm motivated, I want to do this, you want to take advantage of that, but you also got to think long term because that motivation is going to disappear because they are like wildfire. They're like, I'll do anything. I'm like, you've said that to the last 3 PTs that you now said didn't get results or whatever it is. And so for themselves, whatever they're coming into, it's just like, calm things down a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, let's start here. We can always add more if you're starting to do okay with it, but pulling it back and then you feel like you're falling short all the time. Yeah. Mentally, you're gone.
Slower is faster when it comes to behavioral change. And motivation is great, but like motivation flirts with us. And she comes and goes. She's not always going to be there for us. Whereas discipline is something that we can call upon. And we all have access to discipline. We're all disciplined in some area of our life. So it's choosing when and how you want to exercise the discipline and how much of it that you want to exercise.
What do you do to try and like, if you're lacking discipline in some cases and you got to reframe some of that, or you have, say you've got someone that does have the ice cream after the meal every night, which may not be a bad thing, but maybe that does need to change. How do you approach trying to reframe some of those routines? The thing I always ask is like, what am I willing to do? What changes can I make? What am I willing to do? And it starts with curiosity. It's like, okay, what am I currently doing now? And am I happy with it? Like, is this serving me? It's like, oh, sometimes I'm like, I'm just being a little bit too comfortable. Like I have that. I'm like, I could probably do better than this. So it's like, okay, if I don't want to be comfortable and I want to be challenged a little bit more, what is the thing that I'm willing to do and where am I going to put it? Like what am I willing to do and how am I going to achieve it? Where in my day am I going to put it? How am I going to set myself up so that I prompt myself to do that thing? And so when it comes to clients like eating an ice cream after dinner, I'm like, that's not bad, but are you planning that in your diet? And can you tune in whether it's a craving? Is it a want or a need? Is it craving? Is it just something that you're doing because you're bored? Okay, cool. So the next time that you eat your dinner and you're like, I want to go have an ice cream, I want you to sit and I want you to ask yourself, is this the thing that I really want to do? After I eat this ice cream, am I going to be happy? Like, am I going to be like, yeah, cool, that's fine? Or am I going to be upset with myself?
And if the answer is I'm going to be fine, go and do the thing. But as long as everything is tracked and planned, then you don't have anything to worry about with that. But if it's exercising, activities or behaviors that is starting to become and feel out of control, then it's like, okay, we're not going to take it out, but maybe we put it somewhere else in the day where you've got a little bit more access to discipline. Because at the end of the day, most people's willpower is really thin, right? That's where we have had the end of the day, we've had the kids, a shitty day at work or a great day at work, like whatever it is. Like people celebrate with food and we also eat when we're upset. Like food is just this thing that we have to eat it to survive. So that's the tricky part. We've got all these different loops of food in the system.
It brings us together.
It soothes us. It brings us together. It tastes good. There's like religious things around food. So there's all these different layers. It soothes the soul when we're feeling intensity. But how we use it, I think, is really important. So if we're using it to soothe, I think I think there should be a practice of creating some space between whatever your trigger and the reaction is to eat the food, and stop and say, okay, I notice I'm having this thought that I want to eat this food. And just as we start to notice something, we can create a little bit of space. Versus I have the thought, I go do the thing, and there's such a reaction in that we go and eat it tenfold versus just having the one thing that we probably could have just practiced.
Yeah.
And so I think a practice for all of us is the slowing down. Like I said, slower is faster. For behavioral change, we have to slow down. We have to create space. And then we get to choose where something is a reaction or it's a response. And let's start responding to the thoughts that we have versus reacting, because the response can be, I'm not going to go do the thing. Or I'm going to practice having one thing and I'm going to sit on my couch and I'm going to get comfy and I'm not going to be on my phone and I'm going to eat one mouthful at a time. Because often when we're reactive, what do? We eat it so fast that like we don't even know that we've eaten. And what do? We eat the next thing and the next thing, and then suddenly we're full. Or we go, oh my God, I just ate all those chips or whatever it is. And that's really reactive. So when it comes to behavioral change, whether it's to exercise a little bit more discipline if the word's discipline, or is it to exercise a little bit more control if the word's control, we have to slow down to do that.
I think actually might have been Jackson Pios. I think he spoke about it, and it was like the conscious around your eating and like sitting there watching the TV. Like if you're just sitting there eating, you're just kind of like, oh fuck. And like, so whether that's the TV or whether that's a different environment, whatever it may be, it's like being conscious. And so like your example of going to get the ice cream, give yourself those few seconds to be conscious with that decision. Like you may still continue to do it, but at least then you've been like, I'm doing it rather than it just be on autonomy.
Yeah.
And it could be the same with anything. Like could be your job. Like, are you just going to that job because it's automatic and you've been doing it for 5 years? Or do you want change? Do you want to do something different?
Sunken cost fallacy.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 5 years. I might as well. It's like, you've been miserable for 5 years. What about that? What about that frame?
Yeah.
It's like, but change is really hard.
Yeah.
Change is super hard for humans.
Which I guess that all-in mindset, because I've already started, is like that binge eating, binge drinking, whatever it is like, I've had a beer now, I may as well have 10. Why? Like it's, you know, like you said, you could go out, you could have a dance and you go home. You don't have to stay out till 2 a.m.
Yeah. It's interesting, like whenever we say things out loud, we realize how silly we sound.
Yeah.
But it does, again, requires slowing down. And the fact that we have so many different things coming in, like from our phone, alerts, noises, TVs, everything, it is so hard to be slow. You know, when we're seeing everyone on the internet doing the thing that we want to do, what do we want to do? Keep hustling. When actually we need to slow down and be like, well, is what I'm doing actually leading me in the direction that I'm doing it? And am I doing it at the best of my ability? Because sometimes it's not about doing more. It's doing what's in front of you the best that you can. And then once that has plateaued, then you're ready to take on the next challenge, because the fact that you've put all this effort into this thing now, that now becomes effortless. So now you do have more bandwidth to take on the next load of things that you need to do, but also you're doing it properly. And that's the same thing when it comes to nutrition and training. Give me less food, give me more output. No, do what's in front of you at the best of your ability. It's not about doing more. More is just more. Better is better. Do what's in front of you at the best of your ability and you will get a far better result than doing more. Eventually, you might have to do more.
Yeah, you can start stacking later. Once that, it's like training. Like you can start to put more weight on the bar once you've started to lift more, et cetera, et cetera. It goes down that way. Yeah. How do you approach? So you talk about holidays in there, training. seems to some people be like, I love training on holiday.
Yeah.
I don't, or others go, I just want to sit by the pool and drink piss.
Yeah.
Like I know for me, I go, I love training on holiday because it's just what I do. It's my routine. I might do it a little less, but it's for my sanity as well. Do you train on holiday? And what do you recommend for clients when it comes to that?
Yeah, I tell my clients, like, you can either do your program or like just go and have some fun. Pick 4 exercises, 3 sets, whatever range you want to go. That's it. Like, I don't want you to spend 2 hours in the day and your holiday, out of your holiday, to be in the gym.
Yeah.
Go and do something, do what feels good, and your program's going to be ready for you when you get back. Unless they're a comp prep client where, the rules change a little bit. And if I'm competing and traveling, which often happens because I travel so much, I lock that shit down. Like, there is no deviation from my plan. And because I traveled so much in my years of competing, I'm so good at staying on track. There's it's not hard for me. Like, people panic. They're like, I'm like, you just do this and you do this. And it's like, yes, some days you're going to have to suffer a little bit more, but like, that's it just is what it is. But when I travel, I won't necessarily track, but I'm very conscious. I'm like, okay, what can I keep as similar to my routine back home as I can? Yeah. You tend to move around a lot more. Like, you go sightseeing. You probably do a little bit less work. Like, when I travel, I might not do all my calls, so therefore I'm not sitting down as much, but I still have work to do. But I get that done like first thing in the morning while my partner's asleep, so it doesn't interfere with our day. And then I'll either train with him because I love training with him, and we'll just pick a couple of exercises that we enjoy, and then it just makes it really fun. And we train as hard as we want. Like, we've generally got like pretty good recovery, but it just takes a little bit of pressure off. Like, again, the expectation of, you got to show up when you train, when you travel. It's like, do I really? What if I just do something that feels good? Like, that's actually okay.
Get the body moving.
Try the different equipment that I might not have access to back home. It's like, that feels pretty good.
It's funny, when I went to Thailand last year, I reckon I had like the best gym sessions I've ever had. I'm like, because I'm just so relaxed. Like, I was like, oh my God,
you're regulated.
I'm going to like time my PRs to come every time I go on a holiday, because it's just like, you've just got this energy, and I am eating a little bit more food. So I'm like, well, I'm going to use that energy in the gym. I'm getting sleep that I was not getting before. And it's like, but again, like, I think a common theme across some of these things is just being content with your decision as well. Own your decision. If you choose to train, if it's for a good reason, then go for it. If you're doing it because you feel like you have to, otherwise you're a bad person, well, then maybe there's some work to be done there.
Intention is everything. Intention behind your goals sets the experience of the goals. That includes the habits and the processes you take. So if the intention is to move away from something, like if you think about it, moving away and moving towards is the same direction, but different feelings. When we're moving towards being the greatest version of ourselves, the intention and the experience of what we do, the habits, the behaviors, the challenges that we are presented with, they're a far more positive experience because we are working towards being the greatest version of ourselves versus moving away from a person we don't like, right? Not good enough, which I have, or, that we feel unattractive or not confident, or we hate ourselves or whatever, story that we're telling ourselves. Like, moving away from that, sure, like, pain is an amazing motivator, but it can't be the motivator forever. And if pain is the intention behind why you're tracking your nutrition or why you're training, it just becomes punishment. So we have to start to reframe, like, okay, pain is there, great. But who is the greatest version of you? What is he or she like? When she wakes up in the morning, what is the words that she says to herself in the mirror? What's the habits that she exercises? Can we make that, the devotion of that person, those habits, be from love versus I hate who I am, so I'm going to do this thing? Because that has a really low ceiling. And no matter what you do, it just won't be good enough. Versus, who is the greatest version of me? How can I exercise? What am I willing to do that aligns with this person that I've written out on paper, who I'm very clear is the perfect version, or the best version of me? Because unless you know who the best version of you is, you're just doing things. And you're going to wonder why. What you're doing, you feel kind of lost. Or it like doesn't have this meaning, or the intention is maybe not as pure as it should be.
Yeah.
So that really clear quality of who is the greatest version of me? How does she want to live? What language does she use? How does she treat herself and others? How does she show up for work? What are the goals within the work? Like, this clarity thing here, it will help you become that version, because we don't just suddenly magically become the greatest version of ourselves. We exercise it every day. So we are being that person, whether we know it or not in that moment. The fact that we are exercising all those habits and qualities and behaviors in the language, and we are in that transformation, we're in the progression of that person, we are being that person.
I only said that I had a mate I was chatting with, and he was like, I want to be the 1% man. And I was like, oh, why? What is it? Da, da, da. And we went down a little bit, and he's like, I've already started doing this and I'm working my way towards it. I'm like, that's it. Like, you've done it.
You're it.
Because you're going to continue to change the goal of what that 1% man is. So the fact that you're on this journey to become that person, not talking about being on that journey, actually actioning that journey, well, you've done it. That is, you can't get any more being the man or whatever the goals were. And the same here. It's like you're trying to become that best version of yourself. The action of trying to do that is you being the best version of yourself. And you're just going to continue to grow over time as well. And I guess with the fear thing, a good way maybe I see it is like fear is like the spark to a fire, but it can't be the gasoline. It's not going to keep the fire going.
Yeah.
It's very short. It'll go out if you don't keep pouring more or putting more wood on the fire or whatever it may be. There has to be other things that motivate you, because while it's great, it's also very tiring to be in fear all the time.
It is.
Fear of what if this business doesn't work? What if my physique isn't there? It's like, that's tiring. That'll eat you up.
Emotional tax.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's the cost of punishment to ourselves. Like, that's the cost of the inner critic always being at the forefront. And that's also the cost of continuing to do the habits that we no longer want to do. So until you're willing to slow down and create space, you're just going to keep paying the cost until the cost becomes too high and you're forced to change.
So is this kind of how you navigate? Obviously you have high standards of yourself, high standards of what you want with your life. This is how you're framing some of this to make sure that you're still not getting stuck in that I'll be happy when, I'll be feeling good when mindset.
It's funny. Like, I don't think I can't remember the last time I ever said I'll be happy when. Because I know that's not a true statement. But the thing that drives me a lot is I never want to be average or mediocre. And so that in itself is my responsibility to take action on the things that are difficult and hard and things that scare me. And in ways, maybe my not good enough is also a driver to never be mediocre. But, I'm trying to minimize that experience of myself as much as possible, because that is taxing for me. And it does rob me of my experience of myself, especially in the lead up to like public speaking, which I've shared very publicly that I'm petrified of. I've very much got a love-hate relationship. I really want to conquer it so badly, but it's the experience of myself in the lead up that needs the most work, not necessarily the public speaking. That can always do so much more work. I'm still very much a beginner in that space. I have lots to practice, but like I said, the same way that my number one experience when I get ready for a show is to enjoy my experience of myself, especially through the hard times. And then, of course, I'm working on improving my experience of myself as I get ready for, public speaking events, which is something that I would love to keep doing. And if I want to keep doing it, I want to have a better experience of myself. So I'm, like I said, just as human as everyone else through the challenges that I face within myself.
Is that from a point of like the pressure you put on yourself to perform in that setting? Yes, but I feel like the catalyst for my eating disorder back when I was 16, 17 was no matter what you do, you're just not good enough. And that was when I was very sick, but I'd stopped hanging out with friends. I sat at the front of the room. I wanted to be a straight A student. I was like, life gets taken away from you so quickly. I'm going to be the best person I can be. I didn't know what that was. I just knew that, okay, I want to be really good at school. I want to go to a good uni. And I just wanted to be successful. But that was still like, as a 16-year-old, this big open space. So I stopped hanging out with my friends and I started sitting at the front of the classroom, and my teachers at the time, I was quite naughty in high school, so they were like, oh, Hattie, she's sitting at the front. Like, the hell's going on?
and I had a really lovely English teacher, and I said, I really want to do well in this speech. Can you help me with my, help me put it together? And she did, and I would stay after school and I wouldn't eat till I'd done my exams and all that kind of stuff. And I had this very controlling environment within myself, and it came to doing the speech. And unfortunately, I had a teacher at that time who I pissed off a lot in my other classes, and she already didn't like me, and maybe that, gave me so many nerves before the speech, and I probably didn't do a very good job. Anyway, she failed me, and then I remember saying to myself, well, no matter how hard you work, you're just not good enough. And so that really has embedded into my system. And so I notice when it shows up, but it hasn't stopped me from doing everything that I want in life, but it's definitely made things slower. And it's the experience that I have to kind of wrestle with within myself. And I'm very conscious of it, which is why it's something that is very important to me to overcome and get better at. But I notice it can show up in different areas of my life. But it's not necessarily my physique. It's skill sets and knowledge. And I've always told myself I'm not smart enough because I didn't finish school. So, of course, I've got all my own little stories around, you know, how I am and who I am, which, come from that quite challenging time in my life. But I also notice that it doesn't stop me from doing things, which I'm grateful for, because the fear of being mediocre is far stronger than the not good enough.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, like, for other people will have their own challenges like that, like and like Lino, like I said, talked with the other day, like everyone has their own trauma. Some people's it may seem worse than others, but it doesn't matter. Like it's still trauma. You have things you have to deal with.
Experiences all the same.
Yeah, like to me, that is my trauma. To you, that is your trauma. And you could try and compete, but who cares? It's not a competition. Do you trauma versus trauma? Like it's just because, you know, someone's maybe lucky enough that they haven't gone through something as severe. It's like, well, to them, that is the 10 out of 10 severity because it's the worst thing that's happened in their life.
I think sometimes we dismiss our own experiences because we're like, well, someone's got it worse than us. It's like, yeah, but we don't have to dismiss what our experience is. Like we are suffering in that thing ourselves. Like it is holding us back from doing something that we want to do, or, you know, it's something that we are working so hard to navigate. It can show up in relationship. It can show up in our own relationship with ourselves. And I said that to a client the other day. I was like, you don't have to dismiss how you feel just because someone has it worse than you. Trauma is trauma, and we work through it, you know. So as you named, it's like everyone has something that we are challenged with. And as long as we are working on that challenge and we are aware of it, then we can over time, you know, start to not let it be us, but it is a part of us that we can work with, versus trying to like minimize it, get away, move away, or even like pull ourselves down and be like, well, this is how I am. It's like, no, it's not how you are. It doesn't have to be how you are either. Like, again, how we are is a choice. Who we are is a choice.
Yeah. It's like when I'm just an angry person. I think you can work on that. Like,
just keep telling yourself that you are.
Currently, yes. Like your thoughts create the reality there. Like you're talking that into existence, but like it's, once again, you have the opportunity to make the change, which is the same with all these habits, routines, and everything along those lines. How do you deal, obviously you're massively in the social media space, big online. How do you deal with like the negativity that can come because of that?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been online for like over 10 years, and I'd only really lately experienced maybe like the darker side of social media. And I kind of took a step back and I was like, have I been naive, or have I just had really wonderful support around me? And maybe it's kind of a bit of both. And the thing that I learned this year is no matter what you do, no matter how much you help people, no matter what you stand for, and no matter how much you know who you are, people are going to say whatever the fuck they want about you. And it's the practice of, and this was the hardest thing for me, because I'm like, I am not built for being bullied. Unfortunately, it's like just practicing not letting it go, because if you don't do something because someone who doesn't know anything about you has this judgment on you, then they win. Versus you're going to go out and do the thing. Like whether you're successful or not, someone's going to say something about you. Whether you help 1 million people or not, someone's going to say something about you. Like, unfortunately, this is humans. And I have cried many times to my partner around, how can we be so different? How can humanity be so awful? We can be so beautiful at the same time. You will never catch me writing something negative to someone online or even privately. You know, I always support. It's always a go girl. I don't even have to know you to like support you. If I see you doing something cool, I'm going to let you know that I think you're doing something really cool. Because I feel like that is so important in a world where people just want to say their opinion with no understanding of what the cost could be for someone else. And I really feel like that that thing about humanity and the social media side needs to change.
Yeah. I'm lucky, lucky in the sense that I haven't grown enough online to see some of that negativity massively, but I think it might have been Mark Boris maybe, and he was talking about, sit back and you can this is really freeing when you sit back and you go, if they've only absorbed that one piece of content and whatever it is, then or in that one encounter with me, maybe I was a bit of a prick that day accidentally and someone said something online or I've put a clip up and whatever, and you go, if that's the only touch point they have to make a perception of who I am, could that potentially be accurate? And you sit there and you go, oh, maybe. But I'm like, okay, cool. So it's only based on this short 5 seconds. And I go, that's fair enough. Maybe hopefully they come full circle and they see it around, but I'm like, it's not really going to affect my day. Now that's easier said than done again. Like all of these sort of things are, training, nutrition, changing all this. But you kind of go, that's just their perception, a little highlight or a little snapshot of my life. And it may actually be accurate in that on alone.
I laugh because I'm like, I think actually if you met me, you'd probably like me because I'm actually a really nice person. But it doesn't matter.
There's your reply to everything.
Yeah, literally. I'm like, I actually reply to everyone. Yeah. But I learned a lot recently, and for the most part, I have so much support, and I am so grateful. And I think it has helped that I've been online and been so honest and shown my whole journey for 10 years that I have had wonderful people that have supported me. And again, if you're on the internet, whether you have a big account or not, someone out there thinks it's their God-given right to tell you otherwise, and that's unfortunately the way the internet is. So for anyone that is struggling, I promise you, like everyone gets some negative comments. And, no matter how much you know who you are, it does take some time to let the water wash off.
Yeah. So was that just you had to just surround yourself with the right people in those circumstances that you knew they knew who you actually were?
Yeah. That, and just I had to remove myself and just I had to sit back and be like, well, I know who I am. And that statement was like, that's it. I know who I am.
I'm the only one that wakes up with myself every day.
Yeah. And I was like, I know who I am. I know what I do. I know what I'm about. And you might not know me, and that's okay. And you're going to have that judgment. And at the end of the day, that's on you. Because I know how many people I've helped, and I know my truth, and I know who I am. And it was so nice with all the challenges that I've ever been presented with internally of myself to be like, well, I actually know who I am. And I'm not who you say I am. And that was just so solid and grounding for me. And I think that's just the thing I've learned this year.
It's a big opportunity for internal growth then as well.
Yeah.
Because you do, and there may, even through that period, and for someone that maybe is going through similar, you kind of go, well, this is an opportunity to reflect. Have I been slightly shifting and falling into some of these things? And then if you can honestly tell yourself, no, that's not who I am, great. But in some cases, not talking yourself specifically, someone will reflect on that and go like, oh, yeah, no, I did start to become a bit of a tosser.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's we're never in the same space. We might have a day where we're tired or a bit impatient, or we might even, the state that we're in, the way we perceived a comment and then we, fired back was like, oh, actually, if I actually saw this from a different lens, what would be my different answer? Did I come in hot, or did I actually give myself some space to respond versus react? And I think they're little things that we can always tune into and be like, hold on, before I answer this comment or before I respond to this message, where am I at? Am I in a regulated space to actually hear what they're saying to me? Or am I hearing something from a perspective that actually is not helpful?
Yeah.
And then how do I want to respond to that? But again, we've got so much stimuli coming in that it's hard to slow down sometimes.
You can easily fall into the trap of playing the game they're playing then. If, lacked a little bit of sleep, had a bit of an argument with a partner or a friend or just something, you didn't have the greatest workout, and then someone makes a comment that's genuinely not that bad. They're just asking a question or whatever it may be, and you snap. It's oh, I've played their game potentially, or the person playing that game. You got to be really careful online not to feed into that as well. Yeah. And that's what I think. It's hard, but you got to kind of disconnect from the comments. It's post and ghost sometimes.
Yeah.
If you know you get really affected by it, which is hard because then you also want to facilitate the people that are being like, wow, thank you. But to do that,
honestly,
you
now
know.
I just block people. I'm like, if you want to say it about me, like, go, like, you don't have any right to look at my stuff. Yeah, I never used to like care so much, and my boyfriend's like, just block it. I'm like, okay. And that was enough.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, there are some people that literally sit on their phone and it's like their hobby to go out and say nasty things to people. And you got to think, what kind of person are you to be doing that? Like, you're clearly not happy. And for that, I feel a sense of like sorry for them.
Yeah. It's always user 24797 and you're like, you can't even show your face. But I guess, you know, like the reflection there also is like the fact that you see that as being a bad thing. You can be like, well, I clearly have a pretty good head on top of my body that is able to understand that this is not a good thing, understand that I'm not the type of person to do that and not feed into this and then facilitate the world in a way like that and just continue to put out the positivity and the assistance like you do with all your material and same with Coben, like all that sort of stuff. You know, like you're not putting out junk, like it's you're there to help people. So you go, and you know what, at the end of the day, if you sit there and you go, I made X amount of money, I'm really proud of myself, and you know how I did it helping people. You go, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, I can honestly say, like, I love what I do and I feel incredibly grateful to do the work that I do. And, you know, I remember being like, I want people to feel good when they come to my social media. I want them to learn something. I want to help them ask better questions. I want them to be like, oh, I'm not the only one. And actually like smile. Like I was like, I actually want my space to be, when people come to look at my stuff, it's like I made them smile that day. Or I gave them a sense of like anchoring, or, you know, as I said, like I message everyone back who messages me. And so I am a resource for someone who's having a hard time. And I might not have the answers. Like that's, again, like I might not be able to help them in that way, but maybe I can ask them a better question, which helps them help themselves. And that is all I need to do.
Yeah. Or you go, actually, I know someone.
Yeah.
And you handball because you're so far in the industry, you know all these people, and you're like, someone would help you out a lot better than I can.
I'll be like, oh, maybe check this person.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, you've definitely helped provide a nice, an authentic approach, obviously, for people and to hear and see a little bit of behind the scenes. So I really appreciate that. You know, that's what podcasts are for. That's what's the beauty of them. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Cheers.